The desert planet of Ravos 9 was quiet that night. The air was dry, the stars sharp and cold above. In the middle of that endless sand sat a small workshop made of metal scraps and old ship parts. Inside, a human named Jake Marlowe was fixing a broken hover engine. He was a mechanic, one of the few who still lived in that forgotten place. Jake liked silence. It was safer than people. But that night the silence broke. A strange sound came from his old radio, a weak signal mixed with static and pain. Jake looked up, frowning. The radio had been dead for years. He turned the knob, and through the static came a soft, trembling voice. "No man wants me, please. Someone help." The voice didn't sound human. It was deep, musical, and filled with sadness. Jake froze. Then the signal cut off, replaced by a single sharp tone on a distress beacon. Coordinates flashed across the small, cracked screen. Jake stared at them. The location was far. Across the dead zone, a place full of storms and broken machines. No sane person went there anymore. But the voice, it didn't sound fake. He stood, grabbed his jacket, and muttered, "Well, guess I'm stupid enough to care." Jake drove his old hover truck across the desert. The sandstorm was heavy, lightning flashing through the red clouds. The beacon led him to a small crater. Inside it lay a crashed alien pod, half buried in sand and smoke. Sparks jumped from the metal. He climbed down carefully, coughing from the heat and smoke. The pod's hatch was bent open, and inside he saw movement, a shape trying to crawl out. Jake rushed forward and pulled away the debris. Beneath it was a woman, or something like one. Her skin was violet, glowing faintly under the moonlight. She was tall and large, her body thick and strong, but her face was soft, her eyes wide with fear. When she saw Jake, she tried to cover herself with her torn cloak. "Go away," she whispered. "You'll laugh like the others," Jake blinked. "Laugh? Lady, you just crashed from orbit." "I'm not laughing. I'm just wondering how you're still breathing." Her lips trembled. "Because I don't deserve to die yet." She tried to stand but fell again. Jake caught her before she hit the ground. Her skin was warm, like touching sunlight. "Easy," he said. "I've got you. Let's get you out of this fire pit." She looked at him as if she didn't believe him. No one had touched her kindly in a long time. Jake helped her to his truck. The metal groaned under her weight, but it held. He poured her some water and asked her name. "Lura," she said quietly. "Lura of Varel." Jake nodded. "I'm Jake Marlowe." "Human mechanic. You're lucky I was listening to that old radio of mine." Lura looked away. No one else would have come. Jake didn't argue. He started the truck and turned toward his workshop. The storm behind them was growing. As they drove, Lura looked out the window, her eyes full of regret. "They all hated me," she said suddenly. "My own kind. They said I was too fat to fly, too slow to serve, so I left. But they couldn't let me go." Jake looked at her, puzzled. "You mean they tried to kill you?" Lura nodded slowly. "They sent hunters. I thought I escaped, but maybe not." At that moment, a red light blinked on her wrist device. Jake glanced down. It looked like a scanner. The screen flashed words in a strange alien script. "Warning, active bounty detected. Location compromised." Jake tightened his grip on the controls. "What the hell does that mean?" Lura's voice shook. "It means they're coming for me. Outside." Lightning split the sky, and for a moment, Jake saw something moving in the clouds. A black ship gliding silently above the storm. By the time they reached his workshop, the night was quiet again. Jake helped Lura inside, where warm light glowed from the old lamps. She sat down carefully, her large hands folded in her lap. Jake gave her a blanket. "You're safe here. For now." Lura looked around, surprised by the kindness. "Why are you helping me, human?" "You don't even know me." Jake shrugged. "Because you asked for help. And you looked like you meant it." For a long time, she said nothing. Then she whispered, "No man ever said that to me." Jake smiled faintly. "Guess I'm not like most men." Lura lowered her head. She wanted to believe that, but her heart was still heavy with shame. As Jake went to check the door locks, the scanner on her wrist beeped again. The red warning light blinked faster. Outside, in the distance, a small drone floated above the dunes, its sensors glowing as it scanned for her trail. Lura looked through the window, her voice trembling. "They found me." And the night around the mechanic's shop grew very still. The next morning, the sun over Ravos 9 was cruel and bright, turning the sand into burning glass. Jake Marlowe had not slept. All night he listened for engines, waiting for something to come out of the dark. Inside his small metal shop, the air smelled of oil and heat. On the old repair bed lay Lura, the alien woman he had rescued. She looked out of place, too large for his small world, her violet skin glowing softly under the light. She was awake but silent, her eyes moving slowly across the shelves filled with broken machines. Jake poured a cup of water and said, "You're lucky my old radio still works." Lura gave a faint smile. "I didn't think anyone would answer my signal. Most people ignore cries for help from my kind." Jake leaned against the counter. "Well, I'm not most people. And I don't like leaving someone to die in the sand." But his voice sounded tight. He was trying to act calm, though he kept glancing at the window, where a strange humming sound had come from earlier. Lura sat up slowly. Her movements were careful, heavy but graceful. She pulled the blanket around her shoulders. "You shouldn't have brought me here," she said softly. "If they find me, they'll destroy everything, even you." Jake's eyes narrowed. "Then tell me who they are." For a long time, she didn't speak. Then she said, "The Varel High Guard. My people." Jake frowned. "You mean your own people are hunting you?" She nodded. "I was part of the engineer caste. I built things, ships, reactors, energy cores. But when the war ended, I was told my body was not fit for service. They called me a waste of resources." Her voice cracked slightly, but she kept talking. "So I left. I tried to start over. But I took something before I ran. Something they want back." Jake folded his arms. "And that would be?" Lura hesitated, then lifted her wrist device. The screen flashed faint blue lines forming the image of a small crystal core. "This," she said. "It's called the Veil Heart, a power source. With it, they can control entire fleets." Jake whistled. "So you stole it from them?" "No," she said sharply. "I saved it. They were going to use it as a weapon." Jake looked at her carefully. Her eyes didn't lie. There was pain there. Not the pain of guilt, but of someone who had tried to do the right thing and paid for it. A loud click echoed from the back door. Jake grabbed his plasma wrench and moved quietly. Lura tensed. He stepped outside into the heat. The desert stretched endless and empty. Only the wind moved, and then from the far ridge a small silver shape darted across the sky. Jake's heart jumped. A scout drone, he hurried back inside. "We've got trouble," he said quickly. Lura stood. "They've found me." Jake pointed to the basement hatch. "Down there, move!" She hesitated. "You'll be killed." He gave her a crooked smile. "Not if I'm lucky, and I'm very lucky." Reluctantly, Lura climbed down the metal ladder, her heavy steps echoing. Jake shut the hatch just as the drone's hum grew louder. A bright red light shone through the window. Scanning, searching. Jake powered off every light and waited. The drone hovered near the roof, its sensors buzzing. After a long minute, it flew away toward the east. He exhaled slowly. When he lifted the hatch, Lura looked up, her eyes wide. "They'll send more," she said. "That was only a scout." Jake nodded. "Then we need a plan." Later, when the sun dipped low, they sat in silence. The sound of sand against metal was soft, like whispers. Jake was cleaning an old laser rifle while Lura adjusted a broken circuit board. He watched her hands. Strong, steady, skilled. "You really are an engineer," he said. She looked up, surprised. "You believe me?" "Of course," he said simply. "You handle wires like I handle engines. That's not something you fake." For the first time, Lura smiled. A real one, shy and gentle. "You're strange, human." "Most see my body before my work," Jake shrugged. "Guess I look at what actually matters." Her smile faded a little. "That's rare in this galaxy." He wanted to say something more, but the scanner on her wrist suddenly blinked red again. Alert, multiple signals approaching. Lura's voice dropped to a whisper. "They've locked onto us." Jake looked toward the door, his hand tightening on the rifle. The desert outside had gone dark, and in that darkness, faint blue lights appeared, floating closer, like eyes in the night. Lura rose to her full height, her cloak falling to the floor. "If they want me," she said quietly, "they'll have to fight for it." Jake glanced at her, a small grin tugging his lips. "Good. I like a woman who fights back." The wind howled outside as the first shadow moved toward the shop, and then the hunt began. The wind outside turned wild, throwing sand against the metal walls like rain on glass. Jake Marlowe stood by the door with his old laser rifle. heart thumping hard in his chest. The soft hum of hover engines grew louder. He peeked through a small crack in the door and saw dark shapes moving in the storm. 3 bounty drones and 1 large hunter skiff with glowing blue thrusters. Inside, Lura stood near the back wall holding her arm close. Her scanner flashed red again. "They are from the High Guard," she said quietly. "They won't stop until I'm captured or dead." Jake smirked, trying to hide his fear. "Well, let's make it hard for them, shall we?" He tossed her a small blaster from his workbench. She caught it easily, though her hand shook slightly. "I have never fired human weapons," she said. "Good thing it's just point and shoot," Jake replied. The first explosion hit the front wall. Metal screamed as the bounty drones broke through. Jake fired back, bright red light filling the room. Sparks and dust flew through the air. Lura ducked low, then aimed carefully. Her first shot hit 1 drone square in the core. It exploded with a sharp crack. Jake shouted, "Nice shot!" Lura blinked in surprise, then fired again. Another drone dropped, spinning into the sand outside. But the hunter skiff was still out there, its spotlight cutting through the storm. A loud mechanical voice echoed from the sky. "Surrender the fugitive. Resistance will lead to termination." Jake spat in the dirt. "Yeah, not happening." He ran to the generator and pulled a switch. The lights in the shop went dark, and in that moment of darkness, Lura's body began to glow faintly blue, her skin shining through the shadows. Jake turned to look. What's happening to you?" She shook her head, panic in her voice. "It's the Veil Heart. It reacts to danger. It's giving off energy. They can trace it now." The hum of the hunter skiff grew louder. Jake made a quick decision. "We can't stay here. Back door in now." They ran into the storm, sand stinging their faces. The desert stretched out endless and red. But Jake knew the old mining tunnels were close, a forgotten network under the cliffs where smugglers once hid. Behind them, bright lights tore through the sandstorm. The skiff fired and a blast hit the ground just meters away. The shockwave threw Jake forward. He hit the ground hard, rolling in the sand. When he looked up, Lura was already reaching for him, her large hand pulling him to his feet as if he weighed nothing. "Run!" she shouted. They reached the cliffs and found a metal hatch half buried in the sand. Jake forced it open and they slipped inside just as another blast hit the rocks above. The tunnel was dark, narrow, and filled with echoes. They stumbled down the passage, gasping for air. Finally, Jake collapsed against the wall. Lura leaned beside him, her chest rising fast. "You saved me again," she said quietly. Jake laughed weakly. "You make it hard not to." They sat in silence for a while. The sound of the storm faded behind them, replaced by dripping water and the hum of old mining lights flickering weakly. Jake took a small med patch from his pocket and pressed it against a burn on Lura's arm. She flinched. "Sorry," he said softly. "That one almost got you." She smiled faintly. "I have been hurt worse. Pain means I am still alive." He looked at her glowing skin, the light fading slowly. "You really think they'll stop chasing you?" She shook her head. "No, not while I live," he sighed. "Then I guess we'll just have to keep running." Lura turned her face toward him, eyes soft but sad. "You don't have to do this, Jake. I brought danger to your world." Jake met her gaze. "You didn't bring danger. You brought purpose." For a moment, neither spoke. The silence felt heavy but calm. Then suddenly Lura gasped, her wrist scanner flashing again. The screen showed a small map with 3 red dots closing in. "They're in the tunnels," she whispered. Jake jumped up, grabbed his rifle, and looked down the dark passage. "Then we end it here." Lura reached out and touched his shoulder. "If I fall, take the Veil Heart and destroy it. Promise me." He turned, eyes steady. "No promises. We both get out." The sound of metal footsteps echoed closer. Blue light filled the tunnel. The hunters were coming. Jake took position behind a rock, gun ready. Lura stood beside him, her glowing skin lighting the darkness like a living torch. He looked at her and said, "Let's give them a story to tell." The tunnel shook as the first shot fired and the hunt truly began. The tunnels were quiet now. The fight was over. The air smelled of smoke and burnt metal, and pieces of destroyed drones lay scattered on the ground. Jake sat against a rock wall, breathing hard, a thin line of blood on his cheek. Beside him, Lura crouched low, her glowing skin dimming slowly back to its normal violet tone. Her breathing was heavy, but her eyes still burned with strength. Jake looked around at the wreckage. Remind me not to make you angry, he said, half smiling. Lura gave a tired laugh. You didn't see me angry yet. For a few moments, silence returned, a strange peace inside the dark tunnels. The only sound was the steady drip of water from the ceiling. But Jake's mind wouldn't rest. Too many questions spun inside his head. Finally, he asked, "Why would your own people hunt you like this, Lura? What did you really do?" Lura didn't answer at first. She sat down across from him, her large hands folded together. The faint blue light of her scanner reflected off her sad eyes. "I was born different," she began softly. "On Varel, my homeworld, beauty and strength are measured by how light you are, how perfect your shape is for flight, for duty, for war. I was strong, but not the kind they wanted. They said I was too heavy to serve the fleets," Jake frowned. "That's ridiculous," Lura smiled bitterly. To them it was truth. But I refused to accept it. I studied machines, I worked harder than anyone. I became one of the youngest engineers in the core fleet division. I designed power systems, ones that could power planets. She paused, eyes darkening. Then I found out what they were really building. Jake leaned forward. "The Veil Heart?" Lura nodded slowly. "Yes, it's not just a power core. It can tear through dimensional shields, destroy human colonies from the inside. My leader, Admiral Varek, wanted to start a new war. I tried to stop him. I took the heart and ran." Jake was silent for a long moment. The truth hit him hard. This wasn't just about one alien woman running from home. This was about a war that could wipe out worlds. "So you risked everything," he said softly, "to save people you never even met." Lura looked down. "And lost everything because of it." The tunnel lights flickered and dust fell from above. Jake stood and began checking his bag. "We can't stay here forever. That ship of yours and the one that crashed, when maybe we can fix it." Lura shook her head. "The pod is beyond repair. But there's another way." She pointed toward the deeper tunnels. "Long ago, miners built an emergency hangar here, a hidden chamber with old ships. If we can reach it, maybe we can rebuild one." Jake grinned. "Now you're speaking my language." They walked deeper into the tunnels, light from Lura's skin guiding the way. The path grew tighter, filled with echoes of their footsteps. Strange marks lined the walls, carvings left by old miners, prayers for safe travel. As they moved, Jake kept glancing at her. Something about the way she walked, steady, unbroken, made him feel respect he hadn't felt for anyone in years. "Back home," he said quietly. "People judge by looks, too. Not weight, but credits rank skin. Maybe we're not so different." Lura looked at him, her eyes soft. "Do you feel like an outcast too, human?" Jake chuckled dryly. "I live alone in the desert fixing junk. What do you think?" She smiled faintly. "Then maybe we both are the broken ones." They finally reached a large metal door buried in rock. Faded letters read, "Substation 09, restricted." Jake wiped the dust away and grinned. "Let's see if the old girl still works." He and Lura worked together, sparks flying as they connected wires, rerouted circuits, and powered the panel. When the heavy door opened with a long hiss, their eyes widened. Inside was a massive underground hangar, half collapsed but still standing. Rows of old mining ships and supply shuttles rested in the dark, covered with dust and time. Jake whistled. "Now that's a beautiful sight." Lura stepped forward, her glowing eyes reflecting off the metal hulls. "With the right parts, one of these could fly again." Jake grinned. "Then let's build ourselves a miracle." As they started gathering tools and fuel cells, Lura suddenly froze. Her scanner beeped again, not red this time, but gold. A message appeared on the screen in alien symbols. Jake noticed the change. "What's it saying?" Lura's face went pale. "It's from Varek, the Admiral. He knows I'm alive. He's coming personally." Jake's smile faded. "He's the one who called you unworthy, right?" Lura nodded, her voice low. "He will not stop until he takes the Veil Heart and kills me." Jake loaded his rifle, jaw tightening. "Then he'll have to go through both of us." Lura stared at him, surprised by the fire in his eyes. No one had ever stood for her before. For the first time in years, she felt something powerful. Hope. As the hangar lights flickered on, illuminating the broken ships and dust-covered walls, Jake looked up and said, "Time to fix the past." Lura, and somewhere far above, beyond the desert and the clouds, a massive cruiser entered Ravos 9's orbit, the Admiral's ship, drawn by her glowing signal. The storm was coming. The night sky above Ravos 9 burned red, high in orbit. A massive alien cruiser cut through the clouds like a blade of fire. Its engines thundered, shaking the ground. In the tunnels below, dust rained down from the ceiling. Jake looked up, heart pounding. He didn't need a scanner to know who had arrived. "He's here," Laura whispered. Her voice was calm, but her eyes told the truth. Fear. Not fear of death, but fear of the man she once called Commander. Jake turned to her, his face grim. "Then we finish the ship fast, or we're done for." They had been working for hours, fixing one of the old mining shuttles inside the underground hangar. The engine now hummed softly, still weak but alive. Sparks danced around them as Jake tightened the final power couplings. "Almost there," he muttered. But before Laura could answer, her scanner began to scream, a sharp, shrill tone that echoed through the tunnels. The air shimmered as a teleport beacon activated near the entrance. A moment later, 5 armored soldiers appeared in a flash of blue light. Behind them stepped a tall figure in black armor, his face hidden behind a silver mask. His presence filled the tunnel like cold air. Admiral Varek. Laura froze. She hadn't seen him since the day she ran from Varel. "Laura of Varel," he said, his voice deep and metallic. "You have caused enough shame. The Vale Heart belongs to the fleet." Jake raised his rifle. "She's not going anywhere with you." Varek tilted his head slightly as if amused. "A human? How pitiful. You think you can protect her?" Jake's jaw tightened. "I can try." Varek's soldiers moved first. Laser fire filled the air. Jake rolled behind a console, firing back. Sparks exploded, metal panels shattered, and smoke filled the hangar. Laura grabbed a heavy wrench and swung it like a hammer, smashing one of the soldiers into the wall. But another hit her from behind, a pulse blast that threw her to the ground. Jake shouted her name and ran toward her, but Varek caught him mid-step with a psychic wave. The energy slammed Jake into the wall, knocking the air from his lungs. "Weak," Varek said coldly. "Just like her." Laura struggled to stand. "Stop," she shouted. "He has nothing to do with this." Varek walked toward her, his boots echoing on the stone floor. "You disobeyed your order, stole our greatest creation, and fled to hide among vermin. You are a disgrace to our kind." She raised her head, trembling. "I stole it because you wanted to use it to kill. You would have turned it into a weapon of genocide." The Admiral's mask tilted slightly. "You were never meant to decide what is right. You were meant to obey." Jake groaned, forcing himself up. "She's got more courage than you'll ever have, Tin Man." Varek turned, annoyed. Silence. With a flick of his hand, he sent another wave of energy that threw Jake to the ground again. His rifle skidded away. Laura's heart twisted. She looked at Jake, bleeding, gasping, yet still glaring at the Admiral. Something inside her broke. "If you want me," she said, voice rising, "then take me. But let him live." Varek stared at her for a moment. "How touching. You always wanted to be loved. Now you think this creature loves you?" Laura said nothing, but her silence was an answer. "Fine," Varek said. "He can live. For now." He motioned to his soldiers. They grabbed Laura roughly and placed an energy shackle around her wrists. As they dragged her toward the teleport beacon, she looked back one last time. Jake reached weakly toward her. "Laura, don't let them break you." Her eyes met his, full of tears and light. "I won't," she whispered, and then she was gone, vanishing in a flash of blue. Hours later, Jake woke up alone in the dark hangar. His body ached, and the ship they had worked on stood half-finished, silent and cold. He sat up slowly and stared at the stars through a crack in the ceiling. Somewhere up there she was trapped, hurt, afraid, and alone again. But Jake wasn't the kind of man to give up. Not now. He looked at the ship and whispered to himself, "Hang on, Laura. I'm coming." He stood, blood still on his face, and began to work. The fire in his chest was stronger than any wound. Every bolt he turned, every wire he connected was driven by one thought. He was going to bring her home. The stars above Ravos 9 looked cold that night, sharp, endless, and far away. High among them drifted the Varel cruiser, a massive warship shining like a blade of ice. Inside its metal heart, Laura sat alone in a glass cell, wrists bound by glowing cuffs. The hum of engines echoed through the walls, deep and slow, like a heartbeat that wasn't hers. She stared at her reflection in the glass. Her face looked tired, her skin dull, The voice of Admiral Varric came through the intercom, calm and cruel. You ran for years, and for what? A mechanic's pity? Lura didn't answer. She had already learned, silence hurt him more than her words. Varric continued, The Veil Heart will be removed from your body. You will not survive the extraction, but your sacrifice will restore honor to your name. She closed her eyes. So this is how it ends. But deep inside, beneath the pain and the fear, something burned. The memory of a human voice saying, You're not weak, Jake Marlowe. The thought of him brought warmth into the cold cell. He was probably dead, she told herself, and yet a small part of her whispered, No, he's coming. Far below, among the stars and debris, an old mining shuttle glided silently toward the cruiser. Its hull was patched with mismatched metal, its engines whining softly. Inside the cockpit sat Jake, tired, bruised, and running on nothing but hope. He had spent 2 days rebuilding the ship using scraps, parts, and sheer stubbornness. Now he was flying into enemy space with a single plan, get her out. His fingers trembled on the control stick. All right, Lura, he muttered. You fixed my heart. Now it's my turn. He cut the power and drifted closer, hiding behind a field of shattered rocks. The cruiser's docking bay shimmered ahead, guarded but open for patrol ships. Jake flicked a few switches and spoke into his comm. This is Patrol Unit 6 requesting emergency landing. Hull damage detected, static. Then a robotic voice replied, Unit 6, signal not recognized, identify. Jake grinned. Sorry, pal. Wrong number. He slammed the throttle. The mining shuttle roared forward, smashing through the bay shields in a shower of sparks. Sirens screamed. Alarms flashed red. Jake jumped out, blaster in hand, smoke curling around him. Meanwhile, Varric stormed into Lura's cell with 2 guards. Prepare her for extraction, he ordered. But before they could move, the lights flickered and then went out. The ship trembled. Lura lifted her head. Jake, she whispered. The next second, the cell door exploded outward. Smoke filled the corridor. When it cleared, Jake stood there, half-burned jacket, rifle smoking, grin tired but alive. Miss me? He said. Lura's heart leapt. You fool, she breathed. You came. Of course I did, Jake said, aiming at the guards. You still owe me for fixing that hover engine. They fought their way down the corridor, Jake firing quick bursts, Lura using her strength to rip doors open. Every step shook the ship as explosions sounded from below, but then an energy blast hit the floor beside them. The air rippled. Varric appeared holding a glowing blade. You cannot run from fate, he said coldly. The heart belongs to Varellus, and so do you. Lura stepped forward, blocking Jake. No, the heart belongs to life, not to you. Varric moved fast, striking at her. She caught the blade in her glowing hands, pain tearing through her, light bursting from her palms. The Veil Heart pulsed, blue light spreading across her body. Jake shouted, Lura, stop, and it's overloading. But she didn't let go. Go, Jake. The ship must be destroyed. Not without you, he yelled. The heart's energy filled the corridor, shaking every wall. Lura looked at him, tears glowing in her eyes. Then help me. End it. Jake reached into the wall console and began to overload the cruiser's core. Red lights flashed, countdowns began. The system voice repeated, self-destruct in 60 seconds. Varric lunged again, but this time Lura threw him back with a burst of light. The blast sent him through the air, crashing into the bulkhead. His mask shattered and revealing a cold gray face twisted with rage. You'll die with him, he hissed. Lura looked down at Jake and smiled faintly. There are worse ways to die. They ran toward the hangar as alarms screamed. Flames licked the walls. Jake's ship waited, half-broken but ready. Lura lifted him into the cockpit as debris rained around them. Jake shouted, Hang on! They shot out of the bay just as the cruiser exploded behind them, a wave of blue fire rolling across the stars. Inside the shuttle, silence fell. Jake's hands shook on the controls. We did it, he breathed. Lura leaned against the seat, weak but smiling. We lived, he turned to her. No, you lived. That's what matters. Her hand reached for his, large and trembling. No, Jake, we both matter. Outside, the stars glowed brighter, as if the galaxy itself had taken a deep breath. The explosion of the cruiser faded behind them, a dying star swallowed by the dark. For a long time, only silence filled the small mining shuttle. Smoke drifted through the cabin. Jake's hands were still on the controls, trembling. Beside him, Laura sat half-conscious, her violet skin flickering with soft blue light. Outside, the stars stretched forever. For the first time, they weren't running or fighting. They were simply floating, between life and death, between loss and hope. Jake broke the silence with a dry laugh. Well, I guess we made it. Laura opened her eyes slowly, her voice weak but calm. Made it where? Jake grinned faintly. Away from him. Away from war. That's good enough for me. She smiled softly, though her eyes were full of tears. You risked everything, Jake Marlowe. Why? He looked at her for a long moment before answering. Because no one should ever believe they don't deserve to be loved. The words hung in the air like a promise. Hours later, a beacon light blinked on the control panel. A rescue signal. Jake tapped the screen. Someone's out there. A voice crackled through the comms. Unidentified vessel, this is Station Ardent. We picked up your distress signal. Identify yourselves. Jake smiled, relief washing over him. This is Mechanic Jake Marlowe. I've got one survivor aboard. We need medical assistance. Copy that, Marlowe. Docking channel open. Through the viewport, a small station appeared, a floating city of metal and glass orbiting a golden moon. Its lights shimmered like fireflies in the dark. Laura watched it with quiet awe. It's beautiful, Jake nodded. Yeah, feels like a second chance. Inside the station, doctors and techs rushed to help them. Jake refused to rest until he knew Laura was safe. He stood outside the med bay, watching through the glass as they removed the veil heart from her chest. Carefully, gently. Instead of killing her, the crystal's energy dimmed and merged with her pulse. The doctor later told Jake, her body adapted. She's not just carrying the heart anymore, she is the heart now. The energy chose her. Jake only smiled. Guess it knew a good soul when it found one. Weeks passed. Laura healed faster than anyone expected. She often stood by the large observation window, watching ships come and go. The galaxy no longer looked cruel. It looked alive, waiting. Jake joined her one evening, a cup of old Earth coffee in his hand. You know, he said, I talked to the station director. They're looking for engineers. Laura turned, amused. You mean you want to fix ships again? He chuckled. Not alone. Thought maybe we could open a small workshop here. You and me, she smiled, her eyes bright. A mechanic and a runaway engineer. Sounds like trouble. Jake sipped his drink. Yeah, but the good kind. A few days later, the Starhearth workshop opened in a quiet corner of the station. Travelers came from far worlds, humans, aliens, merchants, all surprised to see the pair who ran it. The human was rough around the edges, grease always on his hands. The alien woman was large and strong, her laugh deep and kind. Together they fixed broken ships and somehow broken hearts too. Sometimes customers would whisper, is that the Varel exile? The one who destroyed her own fleet? But Jake would just smile and say, that's my partner, best engineer in the galaxy. Laura would roll her eyes but secretly blush every time. One night after closing the shop, they stood outside under the station's transparent dome. The stars glittered and the golden moon bathed everything in soft light. Laura looked up, her voice gentle. When I lived on Varel, I thought I'd never belong anywhere. Every mirror reminded me I wasn't what they wanted. But now, she turned to Jake, eyes shining, I don't care about what they wanted. I found where I belong. Jake smiled quietly. Right here? She nodded. Right here. He reached for her hand, large, warm, glowing, faintly blue. You know, he said softly, the first time I saw you, I thought you were a crash waiting to happen. She laughed. And you still picked me up, Jake grinned. Yeah, guess I've always liked fixing impossible things. Above them, a comet streaked across the sky, bright, quick, and beautiful. Laura leaned her head on Jake's shoulder, whispering, maybe no man wanted me before, but one human did. Jake looked at her and said, and that changed the galaxy. The comet's light faded into the stars, and for the first time in both their lives there was no running, no fear, no war, only peace. Their story didn't end with a battle. It ended with belonging. And somewhere, deep in the heart of the stars, the universe itself seemed to whisper back, you are wanted.